Hi, welcome to this little video, Furries and Therians. So there's been a lot of press about whether young people are identifying as cats or animals. So I don't want to delve too much into it because when you start looking on the internet, it takes you into a strange realm. But I did find an interesting article, and I'm just going to go through that with you now. And it's from Fur Science, as in FUR Science. And it's about the animal identification between Therians and furries and whether they differ. Okay, so according to the article, we'll start with animal identification. It says Therians often define themselves as people who identify as a non-human animal, a definition which is distinct from that of furries, whose interest in anthropomorphic media does not necessitate identification with non-human animals. To test whether furries and Therians differ significantly on this dimension, they have asked their participants a number of questions about the nature of their attitudes toward their favourite animal species, e.g., a fursona species or spirit guide. So in one study, furry and Therian participants were asked to indicate the extent to which they identified with their fursona, or special animal species, on a 7-point scale. The chart on the video shows that Therians identified significantly more with this species than furries did, providing some evidence that Therians, more than furries, are defined by the strength of their identification with non-human animals. The study also asked each group 5 questions. Would you be 0% human if you could? The non-Therian furries, 39.2%, said yes. The Therians, 58.6%, said yes. What percentage of non-human do you feel? The non-Therian furries, 31.2%. The Therians, 47.5%. Mentally, how less than 100% human are you? The non-Therian furries said 94.3%. The Therians said 95.3%. Physically, you're less than 100% human. Non-Therian furries, 13.1%, and Therians, 30.2%. The last question. Do you feel less than 100% human? The non-Therian furries was 35.1%, and Therians was 85.5%. Now, in the conclusion, it says the results suggest there is a dramatic difference between Therians and non-Therian furries. A genuine belief in a connection to animals that may include feelings of being not entirely human, or at very least of having aspects of one's fursona within oneself. Therians report significantly stronger feelings than furries that they are less than 100% human. Disclaimer, this is their words, not mine. It should be noted that this isn't delusion, however. Therians aren't necessarily looking down and seeing paws in place of their hands. Nearly everyone who felt less than 100% human reported that it was primarily feeling mentally less than 100% human, and far fewer said that it was a feeling of being physically non-human. although Therians were 2 to 3 times more likely to state that they felt physically less than 100% human. Finally, Therians reported feeling more non-human than furries, and a greater desire to be 0% human than non-Therian furries. This further supports the idea that Therians differ from furries with regard to the extent to which they identify with animals and humans. Furries were given a scale assessing the extent to which they identify with humans in a recent study. Therians identified significantly less with humans than furries did, converging with prior findings that Therians are less likely to say that they consider themselves to be 100% human. There's some comments. I'm a Therian and I'm new to the fandom. I'm a fox. I felt that way since I was a kid. I learned about, I think they mean just learned about what a Therian. I didn't understand why I didn't feel like a human all these years. I thought there was something wrong with me. It feels good to know I'm not the only one. My persona name is Summer Blue Fox. I'm a cat. I may be a Therian. It's so good finding out that I'm not alone. I don't have a persona name. I don't want one. I'm not sure if I'm a Therian or a furry. I'm a non-furry Therian, but most of my Therian's acquaintances are furries. At least on the surface, what they tell me. Therians feel more comfortable coming out as non-human in the furry community. The furry fandom is well known for being inclusive and accepting. That behaviour exists elsewhere too. Vampires aren't goths, but they're drawn to the goth community because they can be themselves. They're more comfortable. In fact, in the past, there's been a three-way overlap between the three communities. There used to be a forum, Pathways to Darkness, that was fairly popular for all three. The term furry describes a diverse community of fans, artists, writers, gamers, and role players. Most furries create for themselves an anthropomorphized animal character and persona with whom they identify and can function as an avatar within the community. Some furries wear elaborate costumes called fursuits, or paraphernalia such as animal ears or tails. A small subset of furries, called Therians, believe they are spiritually connected to animals, are less than or more than 100% human, are an animal trapped in a human body, or were an animal in a former life. Other kin, like Therians, feel spiritually connected to non-human species, but the species extend to mystical species, e.g. dragons, griffins, and minotaurs. More than 75% of furries are under the age of 25, and approximately 84% of furries identify as male, 13% female, and 2.5% as transgender. Furries are predominantly white, 83.2%. Approximately 1/3 identifies exclusively heterosexual. Furries are about 5 times more likely to identify as exclusively homosexual than the general population. So the question was, are people identifying as cats and animals? Well, yes, and some to more of a degree than others. I'm not suggesting anyone who is a furry, a Therian, or another kin actually walks around in life thinking and believing they are 100% the animal. However, young minds are easily influenced, and studies suggest that the majority of people who enter the furry fandom have a history of physical and verbal bullying. So it is something to bear in mind, because there are people who are vulnerable. I'm going to add some links in the description if you want to find out more. There's lots of interesting scientific research. There's lots of interesting scientific research around furry fandom and religious affiliations of fairy fandom and people involved in fairy fandom and Therians and otherkins. It's a whole world outside of something I've ever found myself seeking. But if you would like to know more, or if you'd like me to do a more in-depth video on this topic, then feel free to let me know. And take care, and I'll speak to you soon.